There are times in real estate where you're no longer the expert. Um, we can cross several lines, and we're certainly advised as real estate agents to be incredibly careful when crossing these lines into real estate attorney work. We always want to be conscious of giving our clients the best advice without crossing over advisements versus explaining legalities of process and contracts, etc. So it's important that we discover together today what do real estate attorneys actually do, how do they help us with contracts, title searches, costs? Do they actually replace a title company? Why does Florida traditionally use a title agency that has an on-site attorney versus just going directly to attorneys? We'll talk about a few of those things today and just make sure that there's good advisement. So hiring a real estate attorney can typically feel like an additional and unnecessary step in the transaction process in Florida, especially because we have title agencies here. But the difference between a smooth closing and an expensive problem can often mean that we need to have an attorney in the room. They have certain legal specialties that we can't touch. And here at Keystone especially, we only use title companies that are nationally recognized or at minimum state recognized so that they can have a attorney on site so that we're not getting advisement from simply a coordinator that has experience versus someone that actually has a legal background that can take the steps necessary to help us out. Attorneys have specialties, especially real estate attorneys. Last thing I want you to do is getting real estate attorney advice from a family attorney or a municipality attorney or a corporate attorney. They specialize in reviewing contracts, negotiating terms, spotting risks that other people may miss. And yeah, sometimes, like it or not, they may add an additional layer of complexity to your deal that sometimes is a deal breaker. But from a legal standpoint, if it protects your client, it protects the transaction, and makes sure that neither of you are falling into a legal pitfall, certainly worth, at minimum, getting their advisement. So for agents, brokers, investors, knowing when to bring one of these people on to the transaction is going to help you find the right fit. It's going to help the deal be more productive. It's going to minimize liability, and it's going to, more often than not, give your clients a nice sigh of relief. Yes, there's some additional expense involved, and we'll talk about that. But going to sleep at night knowing that the transaction that you're going through, especially if there are some type of complexities with the property, are going to go a long way to solidifying your relationship and their trust in you. What we're going to do today is we're going to break down what an attorney does, traditionally what their services typically cost, when I believe they are required, and whether or not it's simply a smart investment and what to look for when you're hiring one. So, whether you're navigating residential closing, structuring a commercial deal, or resolving a dispute, understanding the attorney's role is going to help you decide if the cost is going to be justified and whether or not you need to bring on them as an expert or whether you can get away with the more value proposition. Some of the key takeaways today is real estate attorneys specialize in property transactions and disputes. Average range of cost that attorneys we work with is anywhere from $250 to $345 per hour. Some of them do flat fees here in Florida based on based on what the need is. We have an attorney agreement here in town that does a contract to close flat fee of $2,000, regardless of what kind of craziness is involved, as long as it doesn't involve litigation. When a deal gets complex, or if you're, especially if you're dealing in the commercial world, I certainly advise you to hire one, even though they are a high value and a high cost. I consider them, especially on the commercial side, legally required. Then look for an attorney with hands-on real estate experience, not just a general legal background. Attorneys are kind of like real estate agents when it comes to there's a lot of them and they're always there and available to give free advice. But if this is not their specialty, I advise you to not utilize your friend and go directly to someone that this is their niche. So let's start with what is a real estate attorney specifically. They focus their practice on the property transactions, contract language of buying and selling properties, and disputes. At the simplest level, they're going to be the person that makes sure that the paperwork you sign is enforceable. They're going to be able to protect your interest, and they won't be coming back to bite you later. Their role can look very different depending on the type of deal and the state that you're working within. So certainly be careful. But it's important for you to understand that real estate attorney isn't a separate license. Any licensed attorney could technically draft up a purchase contract, but the ones I believe that you should be working with on these are the ones that specialize in real estate law and have built on the experience to spot the risks, the nuances, the specific property problems that they have run into. You're paying for their experience. That expertise is going to come from repetition, from closing transactions, negotiating leases, resolving title issues, and it's not a unique and not from a unique certification. With that specialization, you're going to need two broad categories. You need a transactional attorney. That's one that handles paperwork side of things. They do purchase agreements, title searches, liens, leases, closing documents. They're the ones you're most likely to work with on a sale or an acquisition strategy. Their value is going to lie in preventing the problems before they happen. And then you got litigation attorneys. Litigation attorneys are the one that step in when there's already an argument, when there's already a dispute. Perhaps it's a boundary line issue with a neighbor. Perhaps it's a commercial tenant refusing to pay. It's a deal that fell through because someone didn't perform to expectation, and now it's time to sue them into performance. Their job is to represent the clients in court and to arbitrate. From the perspective of most real estate pros, the transactional side is far more relevant. These are the attorneys you're going to bring during a closing. When you're reviewing a complicated lease, or you want to double check that your client isn't agreeing to something risky, these are the people to get involved with. It's also worth noting the role that the attorney will play is not the same everywhere. So in some states like New York, Massachusetts, the Carolinas, attorneys are central to the closing process. In others, like Florida especially, title and escrow companies take the lead role. Many agents go there without ever working alongside of an attorney at all. That variance is why understanding that the role, what the role is, and why it's so important. In most markets, a real estate attorney is a part of the deal, even if they're behind the scenes at a title company. But in others, they can just be more strategic, a resource for you to bring in to ease and comfort the client, whichever side you're representing, and to make sure again that there's no pitfall that they're going to fall into. Let's talk about attorneys versus a title officer. Title and escrow companies in Florida, especially, they're neutral. They're third parties. Their job is to confirm the chain of title, the issuance of title, hold funds, make sure paperwork is executed correctly. They do not represent either party. They really represent against the transaction, and they're not there to really provide legal advice. An attorney, by contrast, is an advocate. They review and they holistically side with one party or the other based on who they're representing. Their job is to make sure the fine print, the negotiated terms, and the client's protections are their special interest. Now let's talk about attorney versus a real estate agent. Attorneys and brokers are licensed to market property, draft state-approved contracts, guide clients through a transaction process. They are familiar with the market. We know how to structure deals effectively, how to negotiate. What we cannot do is provide legal advice beyond those standardized forms. And it's literally, with real estate agents, a state board approved contract that gives us limited control over what can be placed in the blanks only that are available to us. We could administer these open contracts without a state attorney's involvement. Second, you get into specialized wording or specialized terms, you're crossing over the line of legal advisement. Simple way to think of it is agents drive the deal. Title and escrow officers close the deal. Attorneys protect the deal. Every single one of these roles has its own lane, and knowing the distinction is going to help you understand when legal counsel is worth the cost. So what do real estate agents actually do, or real estate attorneys actually do? Why do we need to bring them in? So the attorney's job can cover a very wide range of tasks. The easiest way to understand their role is to look at what the different stages of the deal are. Sometimes they're brought in early to help structure the terms, while at other times they only appear at the closing table. Occasionally, they're called after other things have already gone sideways. So to keep it simple, let's break down their work into 4 key phrases: pre-contract, due diligence, closing, and dispute. So let's talk about pre-contract. This is where an attorney helps set the foundation of the deal. The real estate agent has already put a plan in place, an expectation to move. They may draft or review a purchase agreement, lease, or even a letter of intent, so the terms are clear for an enforceable agreement. They're only going to do what's in the client's best interest. They're not going to get in the middle and say, let's negotiate. That's the agent's job. They're often going to spot vague languages. They're going to handle one-sided clauses. They're going to make things aren't missing protections that could cause problems later. And that's where their experience comes into play. For investors and brokers, having an attorney at this stage is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of headache, especially down the road, because you can start negotiations on a stronger footing. Due diligence. Once the contract is signed, there's something called a due diligence period. The attorney's role is going to shift, verifying the details, obviously. They're going to review the title report, the easements, the survey issues, zonings, compliances, and other potential legal red flags that are tied to the property. If something concerning shows up, like an old lien, for example, or a restrictive covenant, a boundary problem, the attorney is going to advise on whether it can be resolved, whether it should be negotiated, or if the deal should be reconsidered altogether. Their work here is about minimizing risk before money starts changing hands. I've got a client right now that we had dinner with last night that has a problem with some grading that was done on a new build because the neighbor has now built a fence that has supposedly altered the grading, that the builder is refusing to come in and correct the drainage problem because the neighbor has faltered against the original design. An attorney may be a good suggested call here, just simply pressuring the builder to do the right thing, right? This client didn't put up a fence. The neighbor did. So they should not suffer for the neighbor's negligence or poor work performance from the vendor that they chose. Closings. In states where attorneys are required to close, that is not a Florida thing, by the way, they may handle the actual transfer of funds and documents too. You can select an attorney closing office in the state of Florida to handle the transaction. It is more expensive. It has been every time in my experience than by going through a traditional title agency. And I have seen that you kind of get less people on the team to be able to help you through the things. Not as many coordinators, not as many processors, not as many people that know how to help run alongside the real estate agent by keeping things on track. If you don't stay on top of them, get them the things that they need timely, they will not chase items for you, for example. But even though they're not required here, an attorney can step in at any moment. They can review final settlement statements, they can validate loan documents, or even closing disclosures, so they can confirm that everything matches what was agreed to originally. The presence of an attorney can provide a real peace of mind, especially for your more classic buyers and sellers that originally already completed those issues. Especially on a larger, more complex deal, by the way. Small errors can be incredibly costly. And then, of course, disputes. In short, on disputes, Real estate attorneys' value depends when they're brought in. Across each stage of the deal, their role is going to be to protect the interest, reduce the risk, make sure that agreements hold up if challenged. So, handling disputes should be right up their alley. And if they were brought in throughout the entire transaction, they'll know when the dispute started and what actually made the dispute a possibility. We really talked about what the attorney's costs are, as far as a range, an hourly range. However, what you need to understand is that some attorneys even used a tiers pricing model. That'll help them scale with the deal, and it'll make it a lot easier for you to minimize the costs that drive it. But I do want to talk about some of the things that do drive the cost up from a traditional attorney choice. If there is more complexity or risk, multiple parties, title defects, zoning issues, environmental liability, or even legal uncertainties that increase the efforts or exposures. Those are all things that are going to drive up costs. Geographic market, major metropolitan area, and high cost states are going to demand higher rates, right? A downtown Tampa attorney is going to be a lot more expensive than, say, Riverview. Attorney experience. A specialist with a strong track record, especially in the real estate market, is going to command a higher rate. You're going to get what you pay for because you're going to buy into their experience. They're going to know how to see around corners. And then volume and efficiency. If the attorney handles a lot of like similar deals, they're going to have streamlined their workflows. They're going to reduce their marginal times. They're going to make sure that they're incredibly quick and effective. So those are the attorneys that can typically do these as a stacked rate or a standard rate card because they don't have to worry about things falling off the table because they do these every day. So do I need an attorney? Here's the question of the day. Whether or not you need one honestly depends on three things. Your state laws. State of Florida, for example, we do not require an attorney's involvement to close transactions or to handle disputes. We have a dispute process for that as well. Two, the complexity of the deal. If the deal gets really complex, if you are deviating from the typical template of contracts and forms and addendums that are already available to us here in Florida, for example, from the Florida Association of Realtors or from the Florida Bar Association, then it's going to get to a level of complexity where I certainly advise you to have one. And then, of course, what's your comfort with risk? If you're not comfortable or if you are incredibly risk averse, then you want to make sure there's an attorney there that takes that lead and you don't have to say things that make you just simply stay awake all night long wondering if you said it right or if your client understood you correctly. So in some cases, hiring an attorney is not even optional. It's a requirement. But in others, it's more about weighing in the cost of the legal help against the potential cost of a mistake. I can give you a couple of specific examples, case studies, if you would. Just simply tag it below, and I'll be happy to send a few of them to you. But ultimately, you just want to pay attention to whether or not you want to be able, whether or not you need to hire and, of course, vet a real estate attorney. So let's talk about vetting. Once you've decided that an attorney makes sense for you to bring into the deal, the next steps is going to be finding the right one. Unlike agents and brokers, attorneys don't just work with the same playbook. You're going to want to be very intentional how you select and engage them. The good fit for the deal is not only going to protect it, but it's also going to save you a lot of time and frustration. Where do you find these? Honestly, the best attorneys in the real estate business are referred. They come from inside your own network. Ask other agents and especially brokers. They typically deal with the transactions when things tend to go sideways. They're going to know what attorneys handle certain situations better than others. Your local bar association can also refer a list to you, but those tend to be a little more broad and don't necessarily reflect the practicality of that lawyer against your transactional dilemma. Title companies, lenders, even opposing counsel from past transactions can also be great sources. So if someone's impressed you on their toughness or professionalism, keep their name handy. There's also a couple of key questions that you can ask when you're interviewing of whether an attorney is the right fit for your deal. How much do you practice real estate? What types of deals do you usually handle? How do you bill is a big one. Flat fees for closing, hourly rates for disputes, hybrids are all very common. How accessible are you as the lawyer during the transaction? Am I going to be dealing with your secretarial desk, a coordinator in your office, or do I actually get conversation with you daily, weekly, monthly while this transaction closes? And have you handled deals in the specific county that we're talking about before? If a lawyer doesn't have experience in the county where your house is being sold or bought, sometimes it's a lot more difficult for them. They don't know the judges, they don't know how the process or procedures work in that courthouse above what is normal legal procedure. So these are all things that need to be considered. So before you actually hire the attorney, make sure you sign what's called an engagement letter. And the engagement letter is going to document the set of terms that you're going to be working with in those relationships. And it's also going to keep the attorney from finding other reasons to charge against this. So make sure you know exactly what the scope of work is. What do you expect the real estate attorney to do and not do? Second is going to be that billing structure. You want it documented, whether this is hourly rate, flat fee, blended. Clarify any additional costs like filing fees or paralegal time that may be at a different rate. Communication expectations. How quickly will they be expected to respond and how they prefer to be communicated with? Text, direct phone, set an appointment in my office, or hopefully fast emails can get it done. Conflict checkpoints. Confirmation they will not represent the other party in your transaction. They are not to go rogue and decide, let me see if I can help with the negotiations between the two parties. No, that is not how they should be operating inside of real estate. And then, of course, termination terms. How can any of us fire the lawyer if necessary to move on with the deal if things just get too clouded and cluttered? Hopefully this helps. I get this question a lot. We're dealing with a lot of legal issues inside of the real estate community these days, and I thought it was important to kind of bring it to task. Hiring a real estate attorney again is not always required, but it's often the difference between a deal that closes clean and a deal that leaves a lot of scar and headaches. Nothing is worse than post-purchase depression from a client that just spent 700,000 plus on a property, or worse, a commercial deal that spent multiple $1 million on a hotel or a restaurant and now is not feeling like they're comfortable in the purchase that they have made. The key is knowing what expertise is going to be needed and what is legally necessary. When's it strategically smart to throw a lawyer into the mix? And when can you likely proceed without them? For real estate professionals, the takeaway is simple. You need to treat an attorney as another tool in your business toolkit. Use them to safeguard the complex deals, resolve the disputes, protect clients when the stakes are high, help you with language outside of the standard FAR contracts. And when chosen carefully, the right attorney can not only add legal protection, but also strengthen your reputation with your clients and someone who anticipates problems and helps seize around the corner before these issues arise. Have a great day, everybody. Stay legal, stay above the bar, stay smart. And if you have any questions or comments or situations, or if you needed a good attorney referral, feel free to reach out to us here at Keystone. I'm happy to help out. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.